as well as Jim McCracken.
What's the matter? No, you're not going out.
So I'm going to, as usual, we have to start the meeting with a script to establish our authority to meet here electronically. So I'll ask you for your patience while I go through this ever so interesting script. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for each of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. And of course, it is fine to just say you're at home. You don't need to give an address. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So, starting with the roll call, Robert Livingstone.
Robert Livingstone, calling in by phone from home.
Great. Welcome, Robert. Carol Allen. Haven't seen yet. Carol, are you out there? Don't think so. Rand Pixa. Haven't seen his name either.
He's actually an attendee, and I've asked for Laura to move him up.
Okay.
He's all set, Ed, if you want to call him again.
Okay. Yeah, Rand Pixa. Rand, can you hear us? Rand Pixa, can you please state your name and where you are?
Yes, Rand Pixa at home.
Okay, is there something you can do to make yourself to boost your volume? You're pretty low.
I'm having technical difficulties. The computer crashed right before. Sorry. Try.
Okay, well, I think it's probably good enough. I can hear you. It's just be better if it was a little louder. Okay, thank you. Andy Bernick, alternate. Haven't seen his name. Pamela Pineros.
This is Pamela Pineros. I'm calling in from home.
Very good, thank you. Leslie Hatch, alternate. Don't think I've seen her name. Leah Lambus Skidmore.
Leah Lambus Skidmore from home.
Thank you. Larry Dempsey.
Larry Dempsey from home.
Thank you. Jane Kelly.
Jane Kelly from home.
Thank you. Jeff Safel.
Yes, Jeff Safel from home. Sona is here too.
I'm here.
Hi, Sona.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome both. I'm good. Tom Rickert.
Tom Rickert here from home.
You're on our list twice. You're here twice, but I'm only going to count you once.
I've got the desktop and the.
I understand. You told
All
us
right, thank
before.
you.
Okay. Cindy Potter. Did not see her name. A. Dick, alternate. I did not see his name. Jim Drinkard.
Jim Drinkard here from home.
Thank you. Rosemary Clay. Rosemary, I don't think I saw her name yet. I know she was traveling and trying to get home in time to join us. But Liz Murphy, her alternate.
Liz Murphy from home.
Welcome, Liz. Holly Doherty. Not sure I saw Holly's name. Moving on. Don Tennant.
Donald Tennant, calling from Washington, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, John. Carl Sell.
You hear me?
I can hear you. Please state your name and where you are.
Carl Sell from home.
Welcome, Carl. Marta Morrissey. Don't think I saw Marta's name. Steve Levinson. Steve Levinson? Not sure I saw Steve's name. Here, Tom Sachs.
Tom Sachs from home.
Thank you. And by the way, I'm home as well. Jim McCracken.
At home, Jim McCracken at home.
Thank you. Your alternates, Juliana Sharp and Rachel Dexter. I don't think they're with us. John Tomko.
John Tomko from home.
Thank you. Richard Dresner.
Richard Dresner from home.
Thank you. And Jonna Gagnon.
John Gagnon from home.
Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. 19, very good. So we're well over our quorum. All right, thanks everybody. So at this point, I'll pass the virtual gavel to our Vice Chair, Tom Sachs, so that I could be heard to make 3 necessary motions.
Are there any motions from the floor?
Oddly enough, there are. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member and that of the Lee District SSPA Task Force.
John again, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is passed.
Thank
Are
you.
there any other motions from the floor?
Yes. I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And as such, Freedom of Information Act's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line.
Do I hear a second?
Well, we're not done yet.
Oh, okay.
I was just pausing because I was about to say, I think somebody needs to put themselves on mute. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, so the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Track a Plan Amendment page of the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/plan-amendment, or by calling 1-844-621-3956, PTY 711, and entering access code 2345-740-1629. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is passed.
Thank you. And last motion, I move that this meeting must be conducted online during the current emergency in order to discharge the lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the SSPA task force.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion has carried.
Thank you, Tom. Take back that virtual gavel. So tonight we'll be focusing again on the Brandon Avenue proposed amendment at that's 6235 and 6245 Brandon Avenue. David Stinson and Doug Loescher from staff will be presenting regarding the authorization from the Board of Supervisors, Urban Design and Streetscapes, and anticipated community benefits. And we have Lynn Strobel and her team representing the nominator who will be presenting as well. At the end of the presentations, we'll have a period for any comments or questions from members of the public and the task force. As always, interested members of the public are encouraged to provide us with their comments. The time for public comments during meetings may be limited by the need to take care of our business and will vary from meeting to meeting depending on the time available. Public comments can always be submitted for the consideration of the task force by email to leedist, that's LEEDIST at fairfaxcounty.gov. Before each Monday meeting, comments received by Friday at 10 a.m. Will be distributed to the task force members prior to the Monday meeting. As we have discussed before, the task force is only permitted to meet electronically so long as there is a declaration of emergency in effect from either the Commonwealth or the county. The declaration from the Commonwealth expired in July, so our ability to continue to meet online is now dependent upon the county's declaration, which remains in effect for the time being. That may change in the coming months, so we need to be prepared to meet in person, perhaps in the new year. Once we are required to meet in person, we need to provide an option for a limited number of our members to continue to participate electronically as necessary. This is permitted by the Freedom of Information Act, but only after we pass a policy resolution establishing a procedure which must conform to the requirements of the Freedom of Information Act for this purpose. The Office of the County Attorney has drafted a policy resolution for us, but we must pass it before any members can participate remotely once in-person meetings are required. I still have some questions and proposed tweaks to discuss with the County Attorney's Office, but I expect to circulate the draft of this policy resolution to the task force before our next meeting on November 15th, in the hope that we can vote to adopt it at that time. And I should note, I think you all know this by now, that under the way that will work ultimately is we will need to have a quorum physically present wherever it is we are meeting, but then a limited number of task force members will be able to participate electronically as long as we have the quorum in person. And those members who wish to participate electronically need to apply ahead of time for permission to do that. But you'll see all that in the policy resolution once I'm able to circulate it. So with that, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome. I'm glad everybody's here. Task force members, members of the public, members of staff, and representatives from the nominator. With that, I'm going to turn this over to, I think it's David Stinson for his presentation. So David, take it away.
Thank you. Let me share my presentation. Can everyone see the presentation?
We can see it.
Great.
Yes.
All right. As most of you know, I'm David Stenson with the Department of Planning and Development. And this evening, I'm accompanied by Laura Arsenault, Doug Loescher, Liz Haig, and Steve Waller, also from the Department of Planning and Development. Additionally, for Rook Hesingen and Tom Burke from the Fairfax County Department of Transportation are in attendance. And this evening, we'll continue to review the proposed plan amendment for 6235 and 6245 Brandon Avenue. At this evening's presentation, staff will provide an overview of the subject area, urban design streetscapes, and a discussion of possible community benefits that could result from this proposal if it is implemented. Additionally, there will also be a presentation by the nominator of the plan amendment, followed by a task force discussion and general questions and comments. I will start this presentation by providing some clarification regarding the subject area of this proposed plan amendment. At the last task force meeting, it was stated that the subject area of this plan amendment was expanded by the board authorization to include the adjacent Marriott Town Place Suites Hotel property. This evening, I'll provide additional clarification of the reasoning behind the expansion of the subject property to include the adjacent hotel property. As discussed at the last task force meeting, this plan amendment proposes a 175,000 square foot, 7-story self-storage facility up to a 3.0 floor area ratio at 6235 Brandon Avenue. The original geography of the subject area is shown in the aerial photo on the left side of your screen. In short, the zoning classification to implement this use, which would be planned development commercial or PDC, does not allow a self-storage building as a sole use on a property. The PDC designation, as defined by the zoning ordinance, allows for higher densities with mix of uses and encourages lot consolidation. This zoning classification allows self-storage as a secondary use or an accessory use, but not as a primary use. Therefore, in order to ensure that the self-storage proposal meets the zoning ordinance requirements, the property must be consolidated with the adjacent hotel property. The hotel then would become the primary use, and the self-storage facility would become the secondary use under the zoning ordinance. The aerial photo on the right shows expanded subject area authorized by the Board of Supervisors, which includes the parcel proposed for self-storage as well as the site of the adjacent hotel. It should also be noted that no changes and uses are proposed for the hotel property. Finally, expanding the subject area to include the adjacent hotel also allows a holistic review of the entire block within the Springfield CBC, which includes the streetscapes along Brandon Avenue, Augusta Drive, Commerce Street, and the Brandon Avenue access road between Brandon Avenue and Augusta Drive. All right, next, Doug Loescher of the Revitalization section of the Department of Planning and Development will provide an overview of urban design and streetscapes.
Great, thank you, David. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having some time to talk further about the urban design considerations that we really started in the previous meeting. As many of you who were on that call remember, we discussed mostly the building design and compatible building design as the first element of urban design considerations. So for tonight, we're really going to shift the focus from the private realm to more of the public realm. And I think I would point out right off the bat that what we're talking about tonight is based on guidance that is already in the comprehensive plan. And as such, plans are aspirational. And although we won't be making any specific staff recommendations regarding any specific urban design improvements, what we want to do is show what is in the plan and how it can be interpreted. So a little bit of background, as many of you know, the comprehensive plan for Springfield was updated in 2010. And at that time, it focused a lot on connectivity issues and established a number of goals for the Community Business Center, or the CBC. Those were mostly based on a large-scale Springfield connectivity study, and that was done at the same time. In the study, there was a lot of focus on multimodal connections that would help make the area more bike and pedestrian friendly. So really, the plan vision for the CBC calls for expanding the linkages all throughout the CBC with the goal of minimizing pedestrian and vehicular conflicts, but also in developing what's considered the public realm. So David, if you could take the next slide. Thank you. So I wanted to start with the land unit recommendations for this specific site. Oh, you went too far. There you go. If you look at land unit A in the upper right-hand corner of that land unit, that's really the section that David just outlined, really the intersection of Commerce Street and Brandon Avenue. In that land unit set of recommendations is where we find what we discussed last time, which is this idea of land unit A as kind of a central node or an urban village within the business center. And it called for a number of things, including a common architectural theme, but it also had some very specific recommendations around entry features and gateway features, and specifically called out a number of intersections, including the Commerce Street and Brandon Avenue. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but I just wanted to mention that there's a number of places in the comprehensive plan that discuss urban design, but the land unit recommendations itself also talks about it. So David, if you could go to the next slide. Great. So this is the framework plan in the comprehensive plan. It really drills down a little further, especially in terms of urban design. So there's a number of icons in this, and I wanted to just show where that is. If you look at the yellow dot at the intersection, that's the intersection of Commerce Street, which goes east-west, and Brandon Avenue, which goes north-south. At the intersection, you'll see what looks like a green asterisk, and that is called out as a focal point for placemaking. There's also kind of a dotted circle for a gateway, also on Commerce Avenue. We consider these generalized locations, but the idea is to identify the approach into the business center as a gateway. And some of the suggested ways of doing that is with plazas or focal points, as was talked about earlier. The other thing I wanted to point out here is you'll see blue corridors that crisscross for both Commerce and Brandon Avenue. So both of these streets are classified as what they call priority pedestrian corridors in the plan. And these are roadways where the highest level of streetscape enhancements are intended, with the idea of making it more safe and convenient and attractive for pedestrians. So David, if you could go to the next slide. So the plan also classifies the streets within the area, and there's 4 general classifications. There's major arterial, minor arterial, and then as you go down, collective streets and local streets. So what you see illustrated here is a local street, which actually relates to both Brandon Avenue and Augusta Drive in this study. So this is kind of a generalized cross-section of what a local street would typically have. And as you'll see, there's a number of pedestrian zones that are there, including the sidewalk and what's called a landscape amenity panel. And that's really the area between the sidewalk and the curb where you'll find trees, lighting, street furniture, that type of thing. And the elements here, which shows the ultimate version of a streetscape, would include everything from underground utilities to street trees, pedestrian lighting, and street furniture such as benches. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, both Augusta Drive and Brandon Avenue are in that classification for a local street. At the same time, we recognize Augusta Drive is a very low volume connector to the residential areas to the north. And as everyone knows, it's highly constrained by the right-of-way of the highway to the left. And also, because of its somewhat remote location, is not really prioritized as a pedestrian route. So for all those reasons, it's not really expected to have the full streetscape as shown earlier, but it would be expected that future developments would provide for some level of bicycle and pedestrian enhancements. And there's an example in the photo shown on the right. Next slide. So as I mentioned, unlike Augusta Drive, Brandon Avenue is identified as a priority pedestrian corridor, and that's envisioned with the highest level of streetscape enhancements. An example of which is also shown on the right to demonstrate things such as street trees and plantings and wider sidewalks. Next slide. So hopefully not to confuse this too much, but there is also a systems map in the comprehensive plan. It really provides some of the same types of elements that were called for in earlier sections. So the systems map, and again, I'll just kind of step through it. You'll see that Commerce Avenue, again, the east-west, and Brandon Avenue, the north-south, are both identified by kind of green dotted lines as landscaped roadway corridors. But you'll also see the green star and that kind of purple shaded circle, both at the intersection, that really calls out again this placemaking opportunity site. So the idea is that there are gateway features that could be there to establish that entry point into the district. Those could be a variety of different elements, and they could vary in size and scale, really depending on the context. Go to the next slide, David. There are some examples. Thank you. So these are examples taken from more urban areas, but they really just are there to demonstrate how a higher level of improvements could illustrate the ways that either landscape or hardscape or other gateway features can be used to mark the entrance into the community. Next slide. There's actually some precedence to having focal points at this site. As part of that development of the Town Place Suites, there are proffers to have a public plaza and a fountain, which is actually shown on the left. And future placemaking enhancements could include water features and really other types of gateway elements that are envisioned in the plan. And if you go to the next slide, David, there's another set of examples. So these are different options for how gateways can be delineated. And you'll see here everything from water features to public art, banners, wayfinding systems, even just special landscaping that helps to mark an entrance. There's also at the bottom center, you'll see a drawing of the proposed Springfield gateway signs, which are going to be placed in other places in the district as an illustration of what could be at this location. So you go to the next slide, David. To really just kind of wrap up this part of the discussion, again, our goal is to share what is in the plan currently as a way of showing what type of bicycle and pedestrian enhancements could be considered in the perimeter road network. And these could be realized in a variety of different ways. So moving forward, we'd really be looking to the task force and the community to really kind of think about what are the priorities and goals that would be appropriate and of value for the community. And with that, I'll turn it over to David to see if we want to go on to the next section before we take questions.
Thanks, Doug. Next, we will move on to possible community benefits that may result from the implementation of this proposed plan amendment. All of the items discussed at this meeting and the previous meeting can be considered for potential community benefits. Potential community benefits could include building design, first floor use, streetscape improvements, or placemaking and gateway features. The building design of the self-storage facility should not look like a self-storage facility, and ideally should have a building form and character that is consistent with office use, utilizing a common design element or architectural theme that is consistent with the comprehensive plan recommendations of the Springfield CBC. Additionally, community benefits could be alternate uses on the first floor, such as space for community organizations. And another community benefit of this project could be streetscape improvements or a placemaking and gateway feature. So are there any questions or comments regarding community benefits or the comprehensive plan recommendations for urban design and streetscapes?
Anybody have a question or comment? Hearing anyone? Don't think I see any hands raised. If there's something you would like to say, you can electronically raise your hand.
And this is
leave it.
And this is Laura Arsenault. I have a couple people from the public that have their hands raised. I'm not sure if this is the time that we're gonna have the public discuss, or would you like to wait for that to the end?
Actually, why don't we, rather than do this now, why don't we let the nominator present, and then we can take all questions and comments after that, addressed to everything that's been heard. But it would be useful to just explain how to raise your hand. I guess we can wait till we're ready to take questions to do that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Lynn Strobel for the nominator and to her team.
Thank you very much. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and to share some of our thoughts. Kathy Taylor in my office is actually going to provide this presentation, but as she's loading up, and I don't know if she is allowed to share her screen, if we could do that while she's sharing her screen, I would just say that as we are thinking about these elements and talking about the possibilities here, I just also want to keep in mind that we're still in the comprehensive plan phase. And so really the specific details will be provided at the time that we file a rezoning, which I'm hoping is going to be soon. And what we're presenting to you are kind of our thoughts and concepts. And we would, appreciate your feedback to that. So Kathy, I'll turn it over to you, and you can provide our presentation.
Great. Good evening. My name is Kathy Taylor from Walsh Colucci. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
And hopefully my screen is also can be seen. So
yes, we can see it. Yes.
Perfect. It's a pleasure to be here again tonight to present this proposal, as Lynn mentioned, and specifically discuss the urban design considerations of the nomination. Board. Oh, there we go. So as you can see here, it's an aerial view of the subject property, which is outlined in yellow. It is zoned to the C6, and as we discussed in the September meeting, the subject property was previously rezoned together with the adjacent hotel parcel. So while the board authorization of the SSPA nomination authorizes consideration of a plan amendment that would provide an option for self-storage with accessory ground floor uses on the subject property only, to subsequently implement this plan amendment would require coordination with the adjacent hotel parcel in the rezoning of both properties. Thus, as we go to the next slide and begin the discussion on the streetscape design, certain site concepts do consider the hotel parcel to the extent necessary. So here I have two views. The first is a view looking down Brandon Avenue to your left towards its intersection with Commerce Street, depicted by the yellow arrow below. And as you can see, there is already existing mature street trees that line Brandon Avenue adjacent the 5-foot wide pedestrian walkway. Adding additional street trees along this section is precluded, however, by the presence, as you can see, of overhead utilities along the frontage. The other picture to the right is the view coming down Commerce Street, depicted by the light blue arrow. And again, existing conditions include a 6-foot pedestrian path adjacent a row of existing mature street trees, which currently provides an attractive pedestrian access way. As you can see in this picture, the Commerce Street Bridge overpass limits the ability to provide additional street trees plantings along this frontage. So the next slide is just a view of existing conditions of the Brandon Avenue and Commerce Street intersection. And as you can see, the current plaza is relatively well maintained and landscaped. However, understanding that the plan recognizes this intersection as a placemaking opportunity site, the nominator has developed a concept, as you can see here, which would improve the existing conditions by including a larger plaza gathering space with placemaking features such as additional native landscaping and new pedestrian amenities such as benches and bike racks. And other features, as staff has mentioned, can be considered during the rezoning process as we move forward. So this would effectively assist to create a sense of place and enhance the pedestrian corridor. So moving on to the streetscape improvements along Augusta Drive. Again, you can see the existing conditions along this road where there are no amenities such as sidewalks or any type of landscaping, bike lanes, etc. So the picture to the left is a view looking north, depicted by that yellow arrow below. And the picture to the right is the view looking south, depicted by the light blue arrow. So this is an overall streetscape concept for Augusta Drive. You can see that in addition to the Augusta Drive frontage improvements, the developer has continued the pedestrian pathway right over here and provided landscaping internally from the adjacent hotel parcel through the site to Augusta Drive. In addition, the developer also proposes additional street trees along the southern property line down here, and all plantings will be native and non-invasive to the extent possible. So to see the concept streetscape improvements, I have zoomed in on the frontages along Augusta Drive. Along the southern portion here, the developer would provide an ADA compliant 12-foot wide shared use path that could be used by pedestrians, bikers, and a pedestrian zone. There'd be an 8-foot wide landscape area, new street trees, as well as curb and gutter improvements. Along the northern portion here, which is above the travel aisle, the presence of an existing underground stormwater detention facility right underneath this parking lot, and the slope topography limits the developer's ability to provide similar streetscape amenities as the southern portion. But notwithstanding that, the developer will ensure continued pedestrian connections by providing the VDOT standard 5-foot sidewalk with curb and gutter. And as you can see, the pathway will be ADA compliant. So there will be 2 access points on the subject property where an access will be created here on Augusta Drive. And then the existing access leading to Brandon Avenue going this way will be maintained via a current ingress-egress easement. So in terms of traffic, the proposed number of trips that will be generated by the self-storage use during the AM and PM peak hours are shown here by the yellow bar graph. And as you can see, the trips generated by the self-storage will be significantly lower than as compared to the currently approved restaurant trips, which is depicted by the green bar graph in the current comprehensive plan's office use designation, which is depicted in blue. Thus, as total trips are reduced, the traffic impacts of a self-storage use would be generally much lower, as vehicle trips in this area would not be significantly increased. So in discussing community benefits, the proposed use will introduce an urban self-storage facility with active ground floor uses that's 100% climate controlled. It'll offer an attractive design that will incorporate four-sided architecture, high-quality building materials on all elevations, where the building itself effectively creates the plan's contemplated gateway that could be a marker entrance into the area. And thus it would serve to reinvigorate an underutilized vacant parcel. So the next slide actually shows several examples of comparable masonry buildings in the Springfield CBC. As you can see in the context with these existing buildings, we believe that the attractive creative design of the proposed self-storage would be a positive addition to downtown Springfield, as it will fit in the context of the Springfield CBC and provide an urban, pedestrian-oriented, community-serving mixed-use development. As previously discussed at the last September meeting, the self-storage use does make sense in this location because of the various community benefits it would bring to the surrounding community, such as low trip generation and reduced parking, low impact on municipal resources. And in addition, market research has shown that this is a use that is in high local demand, where over 8,000 residents search for self-storage every month in Springfield, but there is a low supply currently, whether it's people needing space for moving or after moving or renovating, or people needing to store items to make room for home offices during this pandemic, or people storing goods for relatives or family members. Self-storage remains a positive and attractive use for this site that is desired and would benefit local residents. And lastly, as we introduced at the previous meeting, we do believe that the incorporation of the ground floor accessory uses will be a huge community benefit, as it will activate the street front and pedestrian realm with spaces that could be unique and different and interesting, and certainly community serving. The options for these spaces remain broad and flexible, as these spaces can be made available for small retail businesses or can support local entrepreneurs as maker spaces, business incubators, art studios, or community rooms. As mentioned, these spaces would be offered excuse me, at less than market rate to truly give entrepreneurs or small businesses the opportunity to take off and launch. So in the end, we do believe that this use will be a great asset to the community, providing a high quality, attractive building and site design that will promote pedestrian activity, generate low traffic impacts, satisfy local storage demands, serve the community's needs, and fit within the context of the Springfield CBC. With that, we do welcome any questions you have, and I will note that we do have other members from the developers team on the call if additional details are needed on anything I've presented tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. So I see we have Gail Little has had her hand up for a while, but before we get to Gail, can somebody explain how to raise your hand electronically before we start in on questions?
Yes, Ed.
Steve, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Barely. You're very low.
Sorry.
I think that was a little bit better.
Okay. If you look at the bottom of the screen and hover over should be an icon of a silhouette. Is that correct? Turn the phone. Or if you go down to the bottom right, I'm not seeing, I guess because I'm the co-host now, I'm not seeing exactly where it's located on the screen.
Oh goodness, I'm not
I
seeing
can't hear
it
him.
either. Okay,
Ed, it's at the bottom of the participant screen. If you open up the participant screen in the lower right corner.
it's the participant screen.
Yes,
Okay.
on the far right. I'm just not
Yes,
seeing.
that's it. If you open up the participant screen, in the bottom right corner, there are 2 or 3 icons. It's the one to the left of those 3 icons. It's a little hand. So if you click on that, you can raise your hand, and then after you've asked your question or made your comment, I would ask you to click on that one more time to lower your hand. Thank you. Okay.
And if you've called in, you can press *3 and that'll raise your hand.
Good. Yes, thank you for that. So I don't know if everyone heard that. If you called in by telephone and you want to raise your hand, you need to press *3. Okay, so hopefully everybody has the ability to raise their hand now. So let's move to Gail Little. Gail, what would you like to say?
But I had a question for staff. I was unclear as to what the community benefits were that they were actually talking about. And then the other question I had was maybe to staff as well. If they do go ahead and make a community gateway feature at the front of the town suites, who would own that property there and who would maintain it? We're concerned that it not be considered public property, because if it is, then it opens itself up to a host of possible problems. We have a big problem in the Concord Center with homelessness. And but anyway, those are the two questions I have. Thank you. I'll take my hand down.
Gail, before
Yes.
we get to the answers, you made reference to we. Are you representing an organization?
The Springfield Civic Association Board has discussed these things, and Marta has been in communication with Doug Loescher recently about these.
Very good. Thank you. So let's move to an answer. Who'd like to take that?
Sure. This evening, one of the objectives of the meeting was to have a discussion about potential community benefits with the task force and the public. And you know, the community benefits could include building design, for example. It also could include, you know, some kind of community use on the first floor. And, you know, it could also be streetscape improvements or a placemaking and gateway feature. We just wanted to open up the conversation with the task force to see what the task force and the public thinks is important for a community benefit for this project.
David, this is Liz. If I could jump on to,
sure.
You know, as you know, this is in a commercial revitalization district. And so normally we don't support self-storage as something that promotes revitalization. And so there's a bit of a notion of some kind of countervailing benefits to promote revitalization. If this use is coming in, what are typical things that we look for in revitalization, like placemaking and streetscape and activation that contribute to revitalization? And so that's part of the public benefits. Some of the things that were presented by the applicant are kind of standard. They're not extra benefits. We're not looking for the standard things. We're looking for things that promote revitalization.
So I think.
Okay, and this is, oh, sorry, I was going, I can wait. I was going to answer the other question.
No, go ahead, Doug. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. Gail, to answer your question about any kind of public area or public space that might come about, I just wanted to reference the actual situation currently with the hotel. The hotel, there's a proffer in place that specifically says the plaza will be open to the public, but the ownership and maintenance will be the responsibility of the hotel. So I guess that's to answer that if there were any additional publicly accessible spaces, they would still be private property and maintained and managed privately.
Good. So thank you, Doug. So what I think I heard from David initially was that the examples that were provided were sort of just, you know, the kinds of things that we could do there, and that we're actually looking for input from the public, input from the task force, with any ideas that anybody has for what maybe should go there. Is that an accurate summary? I see heads nodding yes, so I'll take that as a yes. Okay, if anybody, so I guess if anybody has any suggestions, this would be a good time to make them. I see, so thank you for your question, Gail. If you could now lower your hand, I'd appreciate it. And Diane, is it Boughton?
Yes, Boughton.
Boughton, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Hi. I'm a volunteer with the Springfield Civic Association. And my questions are, I understand that this is just in the comprehensive plan phase, but when it gets to the detail phase, as Lynn Strobel mentioned, will the community still have some type of input on the building, the signage, and the public area? Because we're the ones that are on the ground, volunteers, putting in our sweat equity, cleaning up litter. We've got people pushing shopping carts, calling in utility poles, and doing general maintenance of certain, in the central Springfield area, including patrolling dumpsters. So I think it's only right that we have some type of input. And right off the bat, looking at the public area, I know it's just a suggestion, but when I saw all the bushes or something that's proposed, I was like, well, with the issues we're having right now with trash and litter in our area that our volunteers have been working on, that may be a problem. But anyway, I'm basically asking, will we have continued input on those three areas as you go to the detail phase? Thank you.
I'd be happy to answer that if you like. And this is Lynn Strobel. When we submit a rezoning application, we will absolutely be coming back with the details to the Springfield Civic Association and also the Lee District Land Use Committee. So that will absolutely be part of the process.
And members of the public are welcome at all the meetings of the Lee District Land Use Committee, welcome to give their input.
Thank you.
Thanks. So anyone else from the public with a question or a comment? I'm not,
Bruce
I'm not
Wagner.
seeing it. Am I missing somebody? I don't see anybody.
Bruce Wagner has his
Oh,
hand.
Bruce, yes. Go ahead, Bruce. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve, for recognizing me. And Ed, so my attention now is drawn to Augusta Drive. It's a private road, as we know, along that segment. Wondering if there's anything we can do. Though it's not a high volume road, it is often a high speed road. And they just go zooming right down northbound and right into the neighborhood, which is very close there, just beyond Navy Federal. And this has been going on for a long time. I wonder if there's any kind of traffic calming we can do there. Is it make it easier? I guess is the overarching question also is it easier to affect change there as far as traffic calming because it's private, or is it much more difficult? Thanks.
Again, I'll offer my 2 cents on that, but we will have a traffic consultant engaged at the time of the rezoning. We already have a consultant engaged, and he can take a look at that issue. I think that's a good question that we'll put to the traffic consultant as we pursue the rezoning.
Thanks, Lynn.
Do we have our transportation planners?
Yes, I'm sorry, my dog's picked the wrong time to start barking, but I'm with the Department of Transportation, Tom Burke. I'm a long range planner. We have a group at DOT that deals with traffic calming. So if traffic calming is an issue, especially as it relates to the neighborhood to the north, the residential neighborhood to the north, that's something that if the community brings it to the attention of Supervisor Lusk, he can certainly direct our director, Tom Bashadny, to take a look at that. But yeah, we have a traffic calming program that to address things such as that.
And I'll just say we can look at that now. We don't have to wait for the development. If that's an issue now, that's something that can be brought to Supervisor Lusk, and they could investigate that. So it could be independent of this whole process.
Thank you. Any other members of the public with questions or comments? Not seeing any other hands.
But I'm still unmuted, I think, which may be dangerous. This is Bruce.
I have my hand up again.
We trust you, Bruce. Who's speaking? Is that
Diane Boughton? I had my hand up
Diane?
again.
Okay, Diane, go ahead.
Also on the Augusta side, I wasn't aware that there was an issue that may need any kind of traffic calming, but I've been learning a lot about the complete streets concept, where they narrow the visual field of the roadway to produce a natural traffic calming effect without the use of actual humps, that the trucks that go back there may be severely affected by. Can anything be done about the other side of the road? I mean, I understand that they're going to do the 5-foot sidewalk behind Navy Federal Credit Union, and then an 8-foot one on the side of the storage unit. But can anything be done with the barrier that's already there on the highway side to make it look any bit more pleasing, that might attract people to the area, or just make it look better? And perhaps be part of the complete streets concept.
I'm not exactly sure what we could do to change the visualization. A lot of it is the barriers, safety, to keep the street completely separate from the interstate. But I mean, I can bring that to people at the county department of transportation to see what might be able to be done. But I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Tom, who owns those barriers? Is that VDOT, or are they the counties?
That's a good question, because that section of Augusta is private, like was previously mentioned. So I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's probably public, because it's mostly to protect from the interstate, but I'd have to look into it.
But one thing I was going to throw out, and we'd have to get funding and there'd have to be support for it, but some places have painted them and done fun things with them. You know, they're testing complete street concepts all over with adding bike lanes, and sometimes they have to use the barriers. But if that's something people are interested in, that could be kind of fun to paint. And I think we have some examples, Doug, in our, not right now, but if that's something people are interested in, it could be, you know, fun and lively, or just something to spruce up those barriers. But I think to widen it and create something else would take away from private property, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up from members of the public. So I would want one final request for questions or comments from members of the public, and then I'll be prepared to move to the task force. Okay, let's move on to the task force. So let's see, I think Marta Morrissey was the first one with her hand up. Marta, go ahead. And I think Marta didn't answer up with the roll call earlier, but she joined us a few minutes after that. So welcome, Marta, and go ahead.
As
Marta,
Leo was talking, can you hear me?
Is this Marta? Yeah, go ahead, Marta.
Okay. Can you hear me all right now?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had my hand up, similar to Gail Niddle, the talking about the responsibility and maintenance of those streetscape and, the plants and trees that might be, built into this project. I think if there was reassurance about the replacement up to, I don't know if it would be indefinitely or up to how many years of replacement of trees that failed, or the replacement perhaps of bricks on a sidewalk that might be put in on that corner area. If there is reassurance of the upkeep and maintenance, Marriott is a wonderful business to have in our community. They just keep things immaculately, but so that there's no confusion over who's to maintain it, whether it's county or it's the Marriott. I guess that would all be built in. And to answer your question about what would the community like, fountain is very missed. People really loved the look of that fountain that was there, and like the idea of a water feature being Springfield, carrying over that. We do get bikers that come over Highland Street through our neighborhood in Lynbrook on their way down to Lake Accotink. And so we might want to consider something along like that. As you said, Augusta Street does not have room for bike lanes, but I saw a very neat bike station, a bike maintenance station. It's just it's a pole that contains a pump and various bike tools, repair tools that are cabled to this pole that also can hang your bike up on while you fix it. We, of course, wouldn't want that in the front of the Marriott, but perhaps, back to the side where that parking lot is across from the proposed building. There are like 21 parking spaces, and I don't know, maybe not all of them are needed, but a bike repair station would be perhaps something to think about. The bikers either come over Brandon Avenue or Augusta and connect onto Highland and go on down to Lake Tink. So I think that might be something that would benefit the community that could be thought about.
Thank you. Any responses before we move to the next question?
Ed?
Yes.
Do we know if that's in the proffers for the town place, the hotel? Whether, I have a vague recollection we put that they would be responsible for maintaining it, but I'm not 100% sure.
This is David Stenson. Yes, that's correct. They're responsible for maintaining it.
And do we know what happened to the fountain, why it was taken out?
I could answer that. Gail Niddle and I went to present a beautification award to that Marriott. And we said, we love your fountain out there. And we gestured to the right and no fountain was there. And the manager on duty said, it sank yesterday. So at the same time, that same week, the Blue Pearl restaurant, a half a block away, had been found to be dumping substances down their drain that they were not allowed to do. And all of that block of Commerce Street had been dug up down to the intersection right where the Marriott is. So that perhaps had something to do with their fountain sinking spontaneously.
So hopefully there would be no physical barrier to putting in another fountain, but I have no way of knowing that.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's very interesting. Tom, you were the next one with your hand up.
Okay, and this is more for the applicant. Can you go back and show the pictures of the existing buildings in Springfield? Perfect. what I wanted to comment on is that the hotel that you can see in the distance from the bridge and the Town Place Suites and the office building that will be next to this site and the Holiday Inn all tend to be neutral colors with light brick. I want someone to explain to me how a dark red brick building with a black roof is compatible with everything you see in these pictures.
These are all red brick.
Oh, I'll go ahead and respond to that. The architectural image that we have so far is one that we worked very closely on with the Springfield Civic Association. So we had started off with a building that was of a different design. And in working with them, that's what we have come up with to date. And I'm certain that we will continue to work on our architecture as we go through a rezoning process, but it was in coordination with Springfield Civic Association.
And then this is a question to county staff. How will you judge if it's compatible? I mean, one community, they can't even see the building from the bulk of its community. Shouldn't be deciding something that's a gateway to the community that all of us claim as home. And I think that design is going to stick out like a sore thumb. And I want to know how you would judge it in terms of maintaining consistency of architecture.
Hi, this is Doug. I think that, you know, one of the really odd things about the process here for all of us, and Lynn had and Kathy even mentioned this, that we're talking about a lot of things that typically would happen at the zoning phase. So I guess to answer the question now, when we talked about this at the last meeting, we talked about a number of things. Color palette is one of those. So certainly a balance of color tones that would be harmonious with surrounding buildings such as the Town Place Suites would be important. Also, scale, roof lines, style features, all those elements would be taken under consideration. So although we really can't comment right now on the specific design that's proposed, we would look at things such as roof lines, colors, architectural details, and we would work with the applicant to see how a design can be modified or revamped or honed so that it is more harmonious with the surrounding architecture.
Okay, so we'll do that at rezoning.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you. Next up is Carl Sell. Go ahead, Carl.
Can you hear me, Ed?
I can hear you.
Okay. We spent a lot of time on the Springfield revitalization plan many years ago. And one of the key things was how everything fit together. And I don't see here, we're looking at this parcel in a vacuum. We need to look at it, in my opinion, is how it fits in with the Springfield revitalization plan. That's what comprehensive planning is all about. And I think that the staff member that mentioned that self-storage would not be one of the first things that would come to mind when you would talk about revitalization, although it might be triggered by revitalization. So I'm just concerned that we've got the cart before the horse. And if I'm wrong, we do need to look at it at how this fits in with everything that we propose and is on the books for the Springfield Revitalization District. And if we're going to do it one by one, we'll just have a mishmash of different uses, which was the problem with Springfield to begin with. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Anybody want to respond to that?
I mean, I think you bring up some excellent points, Carl, and that's part of what Doug was trying to present, show some of the framework that we look at to balance development projects with existing principles and objectives. And so that's why we've been very focused on, because the connectivity piece was so important, and looking at what are those aspects that can create the complete streets, create the connectivity, create the places. And that's in part, I think, why also, other than the zoning issue, that we brought in the hotel site as well to make this more comprehensive. So that, I think there's going to be a tension with that, and we're going to have to keep looking at that as we go forward. Anybody else can jump in.
Excuse me, Ed, it would be helpful if we knew what the other revitalization plans call for, because there was some specific language about each one of the land bays, about what would go there and what wouldn't go there, and we needed to know in order to make a decision on this. It seemed to me, I don't remember what all the land bays were going to include, and it might be good for the task force to understand how this would fit in the entire scheme of things for the entire revitalization program. The staff and the citizens spent a lot of time on that, and it should not be overlooked.
I hear you.
Well, maybe that can be part of what we talk about next time.
And I mean, I'm happy to respond as well. And Carl, I appreciate your thoughts on this, but I also want to kind of put out there that this is a challenged property that has been vacant for quite a long time. And I think that it would be a good investment in Springfield. And I think it would add to, the area and assist with revitalization. So I will leave it at that. I think it's good to see and think about how it fits in with the whole. But I think just remember that it is a pretty challenged parcel.
Thank you. So, Leah, you're up.
I wanted to mention that Manassas had a real challenge. Old Town Manassas was stuck in a kind of revitalization hole until a pottery business came in, where they taught people how to make pottery, and they had a storefront. And within the 3 years of that business being there, they ended up with a coffee shop, a small restaurant, some more arts and crafts stores. To the point was that a cornerstone little store that brought in customers resulted in other businesses being able to come in. And if you have something that's artsy craftsy in the first floor of this building, we may be able to start a place where people can come and congregate and end up bringing more businesses into that small space. And I think that's something that we have to consider when you have a possibility of having space rented to them at below market value or market cost, because the industry that can be a foundation can't afford to pay that much. And I think that would be a real benefit to Springfield to start that, because we had at one point a theater that was going to be having actors in it and bringing in those kind of activities, and that just went by the wayside. So maybe this starter area would be a good place to start that.
Okay. Anyone want to comment on that? Hearing anything?
Hi, this is Laura Arsenault. I'll make a comment on that.
Sure.
The uses for the comprehensive plan stage, we just want to make sure that there is some sort of alternate use and that activates that ground floor of the self-storage use, and that specific use and tenant, even more specifically, would be more towards the zoning stage. But just wanted to lay out that now that we're looking for that alternate use on the first floor as a community benefit, whatever that may be. But that tenant would be decided further on down the road.
Thank you.
I'll just add on. I agree with Laura that that's the kind of thing that we can look at the zoning stage, and we can even look at, you know, for the they don't set exactly who the tenants will be, but we could look at what is the market for the kinds of users that we'd like to attract, and at least know if, quote, the below market rents are going to attract the users. You know, what is it they can pay, what, you know, that sort of thing. So we could, when we get to the zoning stage, we can look at that.
I suppose there could be proffers to keep the rents at some percentage of market, or some, you know, to rent the space to something in the arts, or something along those lines. Okay. I believe Larry Dempsey was next. Go ahead, Larry.
I just have a question. The original plan was for one parcel for a storage unit, and the community was negative about that. And then the process went to the Board of Supervisors, and they expanded it to 2 parcels. Did the expansion cause any change to the proposed development process or anything, or is it the same building, but it's just now encompasses a larger area? That's all.
Conversation.
Expanding the plan amendment to the hotel parcel did not change the original proposal. And, you know, the reason that it was expanded, the subject property to include the hotel property, was to, you know, holistically review the whole block for this plan amendment. But in addition to that, it also, in order to implement this use under the P district zoning, the self-storage isn't allowed as a primary use or as a single use under the P district. So but it is allowed as a secondary use or an accessory use. So in order to implement this under the zoning ordinance, the hotel property would have to be included in the rezoning, and basically the hotel would be the primary use, and the self-storage would be the secondary use. But it is also, in addition to the rezoning, again, it's holistically view the whole site as well as streetscapes, and get a holistic view of the proposal.
Thank you.
If I could just add, I'd like to also kind of remind everybody that the hotel piece and this property were the subject of one rezoning. They were rezoned together. They went through a proffered condition amendment together. So I don't think it's unusual, if you will, that they will be looked at together as a part of this process.
Thanks, Lynn. Dan Lagana.
Thanks, Ed. I guess I would just add one thing that is, it's sort of been sitting in the back of my head on this project, and wasn't sure when to raise it. So this would be as good of a opportunity as ever. I think there's a real there's a good opportunity here, and we're hearing this from some of the comments, to include additional visual appeal on the site as well. In particular, when Liz mentioned public art, I think that there's actually a really strong opportunity here to enliven the building with public art, and not just against the barriers like which I think is a great idea, but to use the space and attract it. I'm not sure who mentioned it earlier, but someone mentioned the bicyclists that come over the bridge and may stop by. I mean, we're starting to see that if we're going to have self-storage here, then really making the highest and best use out of the way it engages not only the people that come through or not only the community, but the people that come through is really sort of the big value add here, whether it's aesthetics, whether it's the studio, the public art. I mean, that to me is where the value is. And I look at this building and I look at how it's, it's going to be seen from I-95 and it's going to be a gateway. I couldn't think of a better, and I'm editorializing here. I'm not trying to get in front of the plan amendment. Okay, so, but I do want to say that I couldn't think of a better visual than either some kind of public art feature, or at least on one side of the future building using public art as part of this general sense of making the building almost a convening, giving the building a little bit more gravitational pull, if you will, with having people come by and making use of it. And you want people to come and look at the work and so forth and activate it. And I think that would be, in my mind, something that would make this really successful, because you just don't want another big building just sitting against the side of a road. This is going to have to be different.
Okay, thank you. That's the last hand I saw up. I still see some hands up, but they're all people who have spoken, so I assume they just never put their hands down. So I would ask everybody to put your hand down, and then
I don't know how you do that.
Recognize, just the same way you put your hand up. Click on the same little hand button. Go back to the attendee list here. Okay, I see it. With the attendee list, I still see Gail Little and Diane Boughton with hands up. I don't know if they have something new they want to say, or if that's just the residual from before.
I think they'd originally lowered their hands, so I think there may be something new they want to say if
okay.
you take some time to call on them.
If there's nobody in the task force with a hand up. Oh, Jim, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right.
I wasn't seeing that, but I see it now. Go ahead.
That's all right. I'm at the top of the list on my side. I'm going to make a comment following Tom's comment. Carl has a mighty legacy of knowing this area for a long time, but I went off on another browser tab and did a streetscape, and standing in front of the hotel and then going over and standing in front of the office building. The office building is, yes, 5 stories high and is rather a common beigey building. The hotel is 4 stories high and is very white, common facade. And this is 7 stories high on the eastern side of Springfield. And it's the diagrams that were shown to us make it rather, I'll use the term gaudy looking for a landscape or the streetscape of that side of that area A. And so I would think that, yes, we need to have a better understanding of what the county and what Springfield wanted for itself before any piece of property, particularly Dave said that these were put together to make them together. But if this is still going to be on its same footprint, it's still 6245, even if it is thrown in with 6345, it's still a separate building, and it overpowers, I think, the area. And that's just the comment that I would throw in at this stage in the SSPA process. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Okay. Not hearing any responses to that. I will then back to Diane. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Diane Boughton?
Yes, I did. I'm wondering if maybe staff could be the one to answer this question. What I've heard vocalized several times in the community is if one industrial use is allowed here, will there be others? And there's, great concern that an industrial use may be proposed in more visible areas, even like what's on Old Keene Mill and the intersection of Backlick, the executive office building, or something like that. Could you speak to that concern?
Hi, this is Laura Arsenault. Well, anytime we analyze any site-specific plan, which is what we're doing with this location, we have to look at the underlying comprehensive plan and the existing zoning on site. With this property, the self-storage use that's proposed is not allowed by the comp plan, which is why we're going through this process right now to look at what would be needed, what concessions would have to be made to make sure that this use was appropriate in this area. I can't speak to every site in Springfield, but anytime that the proposed use does not jive with what's existing in the comprehensive plan, it would have to go through a very similar process to this. So we can't speak on any potential use happening in Springfield for industrial, but if it doesn't meet the basic comprehensive plan recommendations and or the zoning for that specific property, it would have to go back to the Board of Supervisors for a revision, which is similar to this process we're going through now.
Thank you. Gail Little, did you have something new?
Muted me then? Yes. I'd like to go back to what Mr. Sachs said. I expected him to say something like that again tonight. So between the last meeting we had and this meeting we had, I went around as I drive in my community. I live here. I don't live right next to that building property, but I do live in this central Springfield community. And everybody in our central Springfield community has to go by that at some point or another, just go to other stores. So I really, I feel disparaged when he talks about the community, this or that. And I did look at other buildings, and other buildings are red brick. Now, they may not be as dark a red brick, but any 7-story building is going to stand out. So if it's a matter of the size, emphasizing the color or what, I don't know. But we do have a say. We should have a say in what goes into that area. I don't know where these other people live, but we live here and we do see it and we do care.
Thank you, Gail. I'm not seeing any other. Well, I see Carl. Carl, did you have something new you wanted to say, or is that just your hand still up from before?
No, Ed, I can't get my hand down. I've lost my hand.
Don't worry about it. All right. So I heard, the staff kind of asking for perhaps suggestions about what other community benefits we might want to look for. So there was a suggestion of a fountain, there was a suggestion of bike repair station, there was a suggestion of public art. Do I hear any other suggestions? Anybody has a suggestion? I invite you to just speak up at this point.
Ed?
Yes, Carl.
Everybody should remember this is a plan amendment and not a zoning case, and there's a big difference. But you won't get anywhere. The use is not allowed in this area now by ordinance. So I think you have to go back and look at the entire revitalization area, and we're not doing that. We're talking, skipping ahead to a zoning ordinance as though this is a fait accompli, and that's not the way to do comprehensive planning, in my view.
Well, I think looking at the surrounding area is an excellent idea. I invite anyone from staff to correct me, but I'm assuming that nobody's quite prepared for that tonight, but perhaps can be prepared for that next time. Am I correct about that or incorrect about that?
One of the issues to keep in mind, we are looking at the greater Springfield context and looking again at the comprehensive plan, framework plan, and things that influence this, but this is not a whole area-wide study. It is a site-specific study. So that's why we probably haven't, other than the things that come to bear on this land unit, we haven't talked about the rest of the whole area. But I mean, we certainly can, but we have tried to share what we thought, was particularly pertinent to this land unit. I'll let anybody else add on.
And I think this is Laura Arsenault. I think we can work with our colleagues to find and give you that information and kind of disseminate the Springfield CBC at a larger discussion. I think we were really trying to focus on the design aesthetic as part of that discussion, but I understand maybe some clarification on the underlying uses on those land areas would help better provide for context for this. So as you suggested, Ed, I don't think we're prepared to talk about that tonight, but recognizing that we are looking at this one site-specific properties in the Springfield CBC. So
well, this is the site-specific plan amendment process, but on the other hand, I think Carl makes a good point that it is part of a larger whole, and we need to consider what's around it, especially given all the work that was put in years ago in that regard. Okay, so now 8:36.
This is Tom. Let me just add one thing.
Go ahead, Tom.
I don't think we're really that concerned about all of Springfield, but we want to see what that part of Springfield was envisioned in the revitalization plans. So it isn't the whole Springfield area, it's just that part of Springfield and the revitalization study that was done.
Maybe how well does this plan comport with those plans? Does anybody else have anything to add? I'm not hearing any voices. I'm not seeing any hands. Other than Carl's, which is permanently up. Well, I see Diane Boughton. Is your hand up a new time, or is this a residual?
Okay, well, it was still up, but I did just think I had one more thing to add. In all of the meetings that I've attended, including when the task force allowed this to go forward, I don't think enough emphasis has ever been put on the fact that this parcel is just one block away from a residential area. People live there. Some of them will see this 7-story building looming over the other buildings. And every time we hear that disparaging remarks, it's a big part of how we're reacting, because those people purchased their homes most likely with that as a revite area or a non-industrial use. People down on Highland Avenue bought homes knowing there was going to be an industrial center right across the street. But there are quite a few homes just 1 block away who purchased their homes, have been living there for a very long time, are very concerned that there's going to be an industrial use there. And they feel that they deserve as much input as possible. I just wanted to make that comment so everybody understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, well,
Ed, this is Kathy Taylor. Can I respond to that?
yes, please, go ahead.
Great. So, and this is actually, I think, connected with a comment that Mr. McCracken also shared. So in our previous presentation, and I can share my screen again real quickly. Can everybody see? I'm not going to make it large.
Yes.
So we had actually shared this sort of illustrative that shows the building in relation to both the hotel parcel as well as, you can see there in the right-hand corner, the office building. Well, I can appreciate and understand that maybe the red brick or the black roof or, you know, those colors or color palettes are things that can clearly be tweaked and adjusted and discussed, you know, when we hit the rezoning process. In terms of the 7-story building, it's a little bit different how it's actually measured. I think the interior is different from your typical 7-story, as I understand, you know, so even though we're 7-story, when you think of that next to a 4-story, you can kind of see these illustratives that we're actually not quite as tall as you think we are, that we are compatible with the existing and surrounding buildings. And it wouldn't be something that would, quote unquote, loom over, you know, the other facilities that are in the area. And to Diane's point, you know, the purpose of the community outreach that we did do with the SCA, which, you know, we had a number of meetings, was to try to create a design that the residents would be agreeable to, that they wouldn't mind looking at, that they would appreciate and find to be something that was pleasing. And so we had a community meeting, not only with the SCA board, but we did reach out to the larger community and invited residents in that surrounding area to provide their input. And so at this point, this is a design that we've made many changes to go through to provide meaningful, you know, upgrades and changes to the design to reflect something that would be compatible with the area. And of course, there's always different opinions of how it would fit or how it would necessarily be in keeping with the area. But I think that's something that, you know, can continue to be refined. This is not set in stone. So we are willing to work with the community, work with staff to sort of develop a design that would be aesthetically pleasing, that would fit within the Springfield CBC. And I think, as Lynn mentioned, you know, putting this use in this location would jumpstart or revitalize this area, which is what I think it needs compared to a very vacant parcel right now. You know, put something that would reinvigorate and would invite small businesses, would invite, you know, community uses. And so that's really what we're trying to do here, and create a self-storage that is not your typical industrial self-storage when you think of that, you know, but create a urban design that would activate the ground floor uses and the pedestrian realm. So that was all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I'm not seeing any other hands up. If there's anybody else who has anything they wish to contribute to this discussion, now's the time. Otherwise, I think we're about to wrap it up. Hearing no voices.
Move to adjourn.
Seeing no hands.
Hi, Ed, this is Laura. David, could you give a quick update for next meeting? Just a reminder of date and next steps moving forward before we all say goodbye for the night. Sorry.
Right, sure, Laura. Yeah, the next task force meeting will be November 15th, and it'll be dedicated to hopefully establishing a consensus with the task force. And yeah, I just want to remind people too, after that, then the nominator will also file a rezoning application after receiving feedback from the task force and staff. And after the rezoning is submitted, the draft plan text will be reviewed by the task force. And then the staff report will be published. We anticipate public hearings for this plan amendment in front of the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors in the winter of spring of 2022 as well, just to give you an idea of what the final time frame we're thinking of is.
David, question for you.
Yes.
What happens if the task force does not approve this?
Well, there will be, ultimately there will be a staff recommendation and then a task force recommendation to the Planning Commission, who will then provide a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that will make the ultimate decision.
So, David, I think you're not looking for us to vote on anything at the next meeting, but you're hoping that we come to some sort of a, for lack of a better term, informal consensus to sort of steer the language that eventually will be coming down the pike. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're looking for some sort of consensus amongst the task force.
Well, we'll see if that happens.
And I will say, if I could just add to that, that the issues that we raised tonight in the last work group meeting, task force meeting, those are the issues we're just trying to gain consensus on. So we wanted to present it, give you a chance to digest it for discussion, and then bring it back at the next meeting, like I said, and pose some questions to the work group as a whole, task force as a whole, to ensure that we have that consensus moving forward.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thanks to the member. Oh, Steve, you wanted to say something?
I think David may have wanted to let the task force know also that the Van Dorn Street TSA project has not gone away. So David, you have a little update on where things are with as far as the transportation study. So they'll know that that's something that'll be coming back to them in future meetings.
Yes, we'll provide an update at the November 15th meeting on Van Dorn.
Okay. All right. And so with that, again, thank you to everyone, members of staff, Lynn and Kathy, your team, and all the members of the public who have participated, and of course to the task force. So thank you again, and see you November 15th. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Good night. Thank you.
Remember to vote in 2 weeks and then turn your clocks back. That all happens before our next meeting.
Indeed, it does. Good night.
Hey, Steve, it's Laura. I just messaged you. I don't think I can stop